Welcome to Lola and the Poets, a podcast on the magical reel. Welcome to the fourth episode of Lola and the Poets, and just a short announcement before you dive in, which is that this episode was taped on the 22nd of February this year. And both Divyam, my friend, storyteller and artist from London, and myself, taping from Serbia, weren't really quite aware what was going to happen shortly after we taped the show. And there's no mention really of anything regarding the pandemic or lockdown, which just shows how quickly everything happened and all at once. I hope you enjoyed the show. It's been a long time coming. Okay, so we're now ready to go, and I can actually start the show, which is absolutely fabulous. Okay.
Hundreds of thousands of people are going to listen to him over the radio. And unless he says something that's sensational, it's just no good.
So we are now talking with Divyam Chaya Bernstein, and she's in London, and we're talking for Lola and the Poets podcast about her life and about her work and about her philosophy. So hello, Divyam.
Hello, Milana.
You wanted to say Mila there, I know.
I know. I thought I'd be formal.
Yeah. Both my name and my nickname is fine, because a lot of people I found, if they start calling me by my nickname, they just continue that and will not change.
Yes.
And likewise, if people start calling me Milana, they just continue without ever accepting my nickname, which makes me think that it's literally two names. which somehow it makes sense. Yeah, because Mila is very much it's a term of endearment, but it also is used in everyday language in Serbian to describe things, because it's an adjective, so it makes sense. And so that's about that. That's about my name, which is, I guess, important. What about yours?
So yeah. I mean, I have variations on my name. There's Divsy, there's Divs, which I kind of like. It makes me sound cool.
Yeah.
One of my brothers calls me Chaz sometimes, which is short for Chaya. So yeah, I kind of like all of them.
So when we were talking about the show, and we were talking about how do we start, because we've known each other for a very long time, and we intermittently kind of met each other throughout the years, so followed each other's phases of life and kind of came into each other's lives and then went off. But we met through our mutual really good friend Sanya, who is an amazing person and who will also be on the show. And that was about 20 plus years ago, I think. And
I think it was about 25.
Could be.
25 years, yeah.
Yeah, could be. I don't think it's that much, but yeah, my idea of time is not really But let's say more than 20. And then, yeah,
Yes.
more than 20. And then I think very shortly after, maybe a few years after, I actually went to see you professionally. That was a time when you were doing color therapy,
Yeah.
and we were talking about that. And then after that, we saw each other a little bit, and then we saw each other again professionally when I was doing some poetry nights at the cinema. I did marketing for picture houses for a film, and then you were one of the honored guests and or guests of honor. And then after that, we I went to your workshop. I remember I went to one of your workshops.
Oh, yes, that's right. I
Yeah,
had an art evening. Yes.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that was amazing because I met your peeps and
Yeah.
and got a little bit of, got a little bit of what you do, a little bit of the gold dust of the way where you work, and that was really interesting. And so yeah, so I kind of got a little bit of an essence of what you were doing throughout the years. But I think it's best to start at the beginning,
Okay.
which is in this lifetime when you were born.
This
uh,
is good.
so please do tell me, where were you born, and also when did you figure out that you really like to do art?
Mm. So I was actually born in Dublin, Ireland.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and I didn't live there for very long. I'm My family moved to London when I was probably about 6 months old, but we used to go back every summer to stay with my grandparents in Dublin in Ireland. So I feel this really interesting connection, this kind of magical connection with Ireland, because that's where all the fun was, because it was the
Yeah,
summer holidays and
yeah.
playing. Um, so for me, that connection with Ireland is really important and really magical, even though I was growing up in London, which is where a lot of the boring stuff happened, like school and all that. Yeah, and then I've lived in London on and off most of my life with a few breaks here and there. And it's interesting thinking about when did I realize that I loved art and being creative, because maybe it's like this for everyone when they're a kid, but I just did it, like I didn't think about it. It wasn't a separate thing. There's something about that space of being a child where you just do it. It's natural to play, and art is part of that play. Creativity is part of that play.
Yeah, it's like an extension of you, really.
Yeah, like you don't see it as a separate thing, like maybe maths is a separate thing. um,
Yeah.
Unless you've got a love for maths, which I didn't necessarily have when I was at school, but it's not a separate subject. It's just like, yeah, as you say, it's an extension of who you are. So it was very much part of my life.
Was there anything in particular of the arts that you were attached to, especially in doing?
Um, I really loved making up songs and dances and plays when I was, let's say, up until 10, 11 years old. That's what I loved doing. So I'd get together with my younger brother and my younger sister, and we would just like perform dances, make up plays. We tried to sell tickets to everyone else in the
So
family.
entrepreneurial, it's a good beginning to actually start thinking so early of making a living for your creativity. That's a very good.
It's a good start, but no one
Yeah.
wanted to buy the tickets. So then I was like, okay, anyone who walks past my bedroom will get a free ticket, and everyone avoided walking past my bedroom, or so it seemed. But that's what I love doing, just like making up stories with my friends. You play that part, I'll play this part. I remember being quite bossy, like I liked being the director and the starring role. I don't know how my friends put up with me, but I just had like the whole vision of how it was going to be.
Yeah, I can relate strongly to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and
So,
then
that was I wanted to ask you just a little bit so we don't lose that thread
yeah, yeah.
about the idea of magical Ireland. For me,
Mm,
Ireland, I went there only once, although I feel as if I went there many more times than I actually did.
mm.
So who knows, there's this connection to the idea of Ireland, and I guess the storytelling, I guess it's partly to do with all the Irish writers that I love
Mm.
and the mythology and the feeling of the land was curiously familiar. And then I found out, I mean, I should have known this before, but somehow, one of those things that things about history, but you really don't.
Yeah.
So there was this big exhibition at the British Museum about Celtic art. I think it was just called the Celts, but it was mostly about art. And I went there, and there's this big map about all the Celtic settlements in around the world. And one of them, which I knew about, was actually where I come from. Literally, the
Wow.
literally the area of Novi Sad, and surrounding, like the surrounding area, the marshes, and Fruška Gora, which is the kind of the well, it's not really a mountain, but let's call it a series of hills. Um, there was a very early Celtic settlement there. I'm thinking about fourth century BC, up to the Roman conquests, and when I went to Dublin the first time, and the only time up to now, I mean, I hope to go there more, it's like, oh my God, this is so familiar. This is before I actually got a realization of that. And then I realized, actually reminds me of Novi Sad. This is so strange.
It's amazing.
So, yeah. And I think we start off with the word magical straight off the
Yeah,
bat.
straight in there.
So I wanted to ask you really what your idea, if you ever really thought about it, what your idea or personal definition, if you will, it doesn't have to be, strict, of magical is.
Mm. Well, that's a really good question because it's sort of something that I haven't really formalized to myself before. In a way, for me, it's like an atmosphere that all sorts of things are possible. So something that seems relatively ordinary could be infused with meaning or possibility. That for me is magical. So it's like, it's not so much for me something that I do, like I'm going to do magic now. It's more a way of being in the world. So, for example, if I'm going on a journey somewhere, there's like the facts of that journey, the plane ticket or who I'm going to see and how I'm going to get there and the reason I'm going there. But then there's like another layer to it, which is magical. Like, what is this journey? What are you going to connect with in yourself? What might be transformed while you're there? So I guess for me, magical is like the possibility of something being more than it seems on the surface, and also the possibility of transformation, that I might be transformed through whatever experience I'm having, and maybe other people will too. Meetings can be magical. I think of some of the chats that we've had over the years and the meetings that we've had, they've been magical to me because it's like we sit down and we open a portal and
Yeah.
all sorts of things come out of our mouths and we make connections. And there's a feeling that I have in such a conversation where life suddenly becomes like 3D or something. All sorts of things are possible. So I'm not sure if that's making sense, but it's
It
like
makes
that
perfect
atmosphere.
sense. I think it's beautifully said, first of all. But also, I find it very precise. I think people listening to us, and there will be hopefully people listening to us, I hope. But I think it's very helpful because it really connects to
it connects to, first of all, the way I feel about it, which which is like there's already two of us then, and then I guess there's many more out there that feel the same. That not necessarily the whole idea of the magic and magical is always connected to a ritualistic practice of it in the minds of people generally. And for me, it was never connected to it. And I always thought when I speak of it, people always assume that it has to do somehow with some practice or other, which I never had, unless, divination is a sort of a practice. And there, there's elements in art that are definitely a magical practice. But magic in itself, for me, is very much the way you defined it, which is a potency of life. Like this extra dimension, which when you tap into it gives you a fullness of experience that otherwise does not, if you are not tapped into it, life is somehow very flat.
Yes.
And then when you tap to it, it's almost you get like another set of lungs. It's like there's this extra element of breathing and understanding and having a feeling of a connection not only with other people but with all elements in life, with nature and even with objects, sometimes very much with objects, with a particular moment in time. The element of timing is also important. And all of that connected to me had the utmost importance in life, but somehow everything that educationally that we go through very often, and we were talking about this a little bit in our pre-talk before we started recording, is that a lot of it is dropped within the formal traditional types of education that we had and we have had, both of us and people have. And I think that that's a missing element in our educational system is a very important void that needs to be somehow addressed, and that people are then afterwards searching for that, how to fill that particular void in different places. So I just wanted to kind of go back to when you were growing up, having a little idea of what it's very young to say, what is your philosophical system at the age of 5? But I guess you had one if you think about it, and how that idea of how you perceived the world when you were very young, how did it transform and how does it inform who you are now?
Well, it's interesting, what you're saying about what was your philosophy age 5, because I've got this photo of myself when I think I was around 4 or 5. And I'm telling you, that girl knows everything.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably doing all I can to sort of get back to her in my life, because she had it all. And I see it in other young girls and young boys. It's like they've got the whole thing going on. They know so much. And I have a
photo of, just like you've said, I'm age 9 then, so you're a bit early. I was age 9 because that was when I came back from Iran, and I know that photo. And actually, friends of mine were commenting on that photo, going like, "You seem to be much smarter then than you are now." And I'm like, "Yep, no,
no arguments."
Yeah. It is at the same time going through a lifetime of experience, only to go back to a certain wisdom that you had as a child. Without all the conditioning that came with all these experiences. And also, so just a little bit about the education, the traditional education that you actually have had, because that will then inform what you're doing now. And when we talk about it, it will be easier to figure out where you've kept the elements of what you did and where you expanded on them.
Okay, so after school, I went to university in Leeds in the north of England, and I studied English, literature and language, but I spent most of my time in the theatre department, even though I wasn't officially booked to do theatre. So I just loved being in plays. And so when I graduated from university, I went to drama school because I thought I wanted, well, I don't know if I thought I wanted to be an actress. I wasn't sure about that. I just wanted to be in plays.
Yeah. You wanted to stay in that kind of environment. Would that be
absolutely
correct to say? Yeah.
Yes. And actually, when I left drama school, I think I went through the motions of what you're meant to do to become an actress. I got an agent, I got my pictures done, I went to auditions and all of that. But I really didn't like it because I wasn't spending all my time being in plays. I was spending all my time doing all this other stuff, which I wasn't very good at. I wasn't very good at doing auditions and answering questions in interviews. And
so you were spending more time promoting yourself than actually creating something.
Yeah, which is what I really missed. And the other thing that was a little weird was what I had loved particularly when I was at university, but also when I was at drama school, because we were all young students, we all got to play all these different roles in the productions we were doing. Whereas when I came out, I was suddenly being sent for the role of the young girl or the young woman. And it all suddenly became a bit boring because I was like, that's what I am in my life. I want to be like the magician and I want to be in the revolution. And, I want to do all these things that I had done before. I want to be Beowulf. I got to play Beowulf at drama school and it was just brilliant. It didn't matter that Beowulf was a man and was a warrior and was probably older than me or whatever. It's like I got to do everything. And suddenly I was being put in this box of playing the young woman. And
you were flattened out in a way.
I was flattened out, and I actually what I loved about drama was I got to expand my repertoire to be everything. And suddenly it was like, we just want you as you actually are in the real world, like a typecast thing.
Yes.
Which I was already doing, so that was kind of boring. So I sort of ran out of steam. But the weird thing was that while I was trying to get all this acting work, which I wasn't really getting, I kept being offered storytelling work. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try that. Absolutely loved it. And it was coming so much more easily to me than acting jobs. So I dropped the acting after about a year and just carried on being a storyteller without necessarily training as a storyteller. I just sort of fell into it. It seems, I don't know a huge amount about it, but it seems like storytelling as a profession has really grown over the last 20, 30 years. So around the time when I was getting into it, there was definitely professional storytellers round and about. I went to see a couple of them, and I used to go to a storytelling festival every summer. And there's this whole, I didn't know it existed, this whole world of storytellers who traveled around the world telling stories. It was like a thing.
Yeah.
They performed stories. So let's say at the festivals, they would tell a story to sometimes small audiences, sometimes really big audiences in the evenings. And it was quite incredible, like long stories that they had memorized and learned and really brought it to life. But also I think storytellers do workshops with kids. They teach storytelling. They use it as a process to explore other things. Like it's kind of amazing because in a way it's restoring storytelling to a function that maybe it did once have.
I'm thinking about the idea of this alchemical fusing of different things that you are part of, that you do. Mm-hmm. And the way that I also live my life fusing different kinds of expressions and work, how it is all part of one story. The fusion of things, you realize at the end that what you are is a storyteller, because that's what people used to be of the ilk.
Yes. And, I love what you were just describing, as I'm doing all these things to tell my story, because that's the thing that brings all the different elements together, the poetry, the reviews, the different things. It's all telling one story. And
Yeah.
sometimes you need different mediums to tell the story at different points. And where just choosing one speciality wouldn't do it, because you need all of them.
In a way, it's almost using different modes of transport to go through to a certain direction. So now I'm
Oh,
going a
yeah.
little bit by train. So I'm walking.
I love that. That's
I'm
absolutely
catching a
brilliant
plane at this
image.
point because this way I can't really go there without, catching a plane. It's almost like
Oh,
the medium presents itself at that particular phase in life, and that's now what you do.
I
And
love
then,
that.
you know, I think one of the things with me, I don't know, we'll talk about your challenges as well, because that's really important part of the story, is what challenges us throughout the road is that idea of the environment that I got through this fragmentation of having to be put in a certain frame so
Yeah.
people can then feel easier about who I am. Almost, like,
Yeah.
okay, so this is not what you do. Yeah. So, okay, so what is, can you please tell us now that particular fragment of you? What is it? And it's almost like describing, so my fingers are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is it that you were challenged throughout your life, being so multifaceted and having the need to tell your story through different media and also through different kinds of expression?
Mm. Well, there was a couple of main challenges that I think have been with me all through my journey and are probably still with me, even though I've sort of traveled quite a way. And I think one challenge is something that I received as either a conditioning or a communication when I was growing up, that creativity and my creativity were not really important. They were sort of nice frivolity, like, oh, that's nice, but not really seen as being valuable in and of itself.
Yeah. It's like a
Um,
hobby. It was a hobby.
yeah, and I have
Just
to
treat it as
say
a
that
hobby.
word hobby, like when people use the word hobby now, I just want to scream, because it reminds me of this whole
I absolutely
idea,
agree. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I came from the same conditioning. It's really lovely that you have all these talents. What a lovely hobby you have.
Yeah, it's suddenly, and that thing of being put in a box, that's being put
Yeah.
in, for me, in a small box, not just
Yeah.
in a box, a really small box.
Yeah.
So that communication was really strong from an early age. Like, the grown-ups are doing the important stuff, and what you're doing is not so important. And somehow this really stuck with me, because it created a sort of conflict, because in a way my whole life has been devoted to exploring creativity. It wasn't even a decision. It's just like, this is what's important to me. But the whole time in the background, people talk about their inner critic. My inner voice was like, but it's not really important. Oh, that's nice, but no one cares. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And I had, quite some chunks of my life where that really threw me, where I was sort of creating every day, but feeling at the same time it was pointless. It was like a sense of pointlessness. And it's only in recent years, when I've been really connecting with other people creatively through communities, and through sharing my work more than I was at that time, that that bubble has sort of popped a bit, and it's still there a bit, but I'm connected with so many people who also think it's really important
Yeah.
and love it so much that it's sort of blasted that inner critic voice quite strongly. So that's definitely been a challenge. It's almost like I've often had the image of walking through somewhere that's quite windy with like a naked candle flame and trying to make sure it doesn't go out, and just feeling like there's so many forces that could blow this candle out, but I'm going to keep this flame alight. And then suddenly meeting other people with their flames, and suddenly you've got a fire,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
very
alive.
beautiful. Yeah. And very
And you could
beautiful and
change the
very
world with
true.
that.
Yeah. I think that very similar to you, that idea of your creativity being somehow an ornament rather than your essence. Um, for me, in my growing up, it was very much a part of my growing up, and also the greatest challenge as well. I connect that fragmentation that I was talking about with the idea of not being able to stand my ground and say, this is where my life comes from. This is not something, this is not like an extra, this is not a side dish, this is me. And that also is the idea of being able to function in society and being part of society. Not only finding my tribe, which is, I think, the key element, is first to find people that are similar and also to grow with them and feel that you're not alone, but also to understand that not everything needs to be very obviously utilitarian. I think the idea is, oh, what use is it to society?
Yeah.
What is it exactly that you do? How does that then, become of use? Because how can progress be made in any kind of way in society if everything is looked from the end, not the beginning? Because new professions and new ways of thinking come from a creative process that then ends up being something that's going to benefit both yourself and society. You don't go from the end going, okay, so what is going to be my end product? and then go backwards. It is very much a thinking of people as machines of producing a certain thing. So you have to know with a machine what it's going to produce. Otherwise, why buy a machine? And I think that's somehow the mechanistic process of thinking that we're all part of, in Western society, certainly, maybe not in other societies so much. It pushes people to that way of thinking. And I think a lot of us suffer very much because in that way, there's certain people that very early on get a boost because they're very, what they choose to do is very functional. And then
Yeah.
other people get sidelined because it's not immediately clear, to their elders of what is it exactly that they will be used for. And that is so incredibly, it's cruel, but at the same time, it doesn't help anybody because I think it also creates a lot of disturbances, both in terms of our mental and emotional lives and the way we function in the world, and also our health as well. Because
Well,
yeah.
you were using the word essence, like this is something that's coming from my essence. And then to think of how am I going to package my essence to make it utilitarian? It's almost like, don't do that, just, and, a line came to me when you were talking, we were talking about the Irish poets. There's a line from Yeats. I can't remember the whole poem, but one of the lines, maybe the last line of the poem, is tread softly because you tread on my dreams. I don't know if I've got it exactly right, but that came to me when you were talking, because it's like, this is something that's coming from deep inside, that is your inner world and your connection with that inner world. That in itself is hugely valuable, even if it never becomes a something that you can make use of or turn into a product or whatever. It's so hugely valuable, and it can so easily be invisible in a utilitarian world. And I think one of the things that's so valuable about art and just exploring creatively is you're making visible something that is so important but could so easily not be seen.
Yes, you are lighting a way for others as well, which is your allegory with the candle.
Mm,
It
yeah,
is literally every single poem ever written is hugely important,
yeah,
no matter if it's read by one person or thousands or millions, because it is a light
yeah,
that's shown. And I think that it is very hard to, at the same time, accept that sometimes there will be, parts of life that might not be colored by your essence so much as others. Sometimes it's necessary because we go through different phases in life. But I think it's important for people to not forget who they are and not forget where they're going. That even though this is more like a public service, and so for anybody that's listening, it's like even though you don't go through, if even though you might not be doing what you should be doing, sometimes in life it's just that kind of period. But don't let go of that creative expression of the essence of who you are, whatever that expression is. You don't have to be a natural artist. Whatever your expression, your chosen expression of self or expressions of self are, always keep in a way journaling, which is something we're going to now talk about because you do a lot of that. Always keep journaling yourself, because the way that we keep tapped on all the bills that we have in life and all the documents and stuff, how little we pay attention generally to our inner processes and inner workings and things that are staples in our life, our bits and pieces of our soul, and how that is extremely important. And then there will come a time and a period in these cycles that will be open for planting and harvesting of your own creativity, and that will be a time when you'll be doing exactly what you should be doing. So in a way, it doesn't always have to be a straight line. Sometimes it's very zigzag.
yeah. And also, just carrying on with this theme of sort of times when you're not entirely sure. Because I certainly have had many times in my life where I'm like, I actually don't really know what I'm doing or where I'm going. But somehow just writing or drawing or making cartoons or just doing something creative, it's like keeping the channel open. I'm listening.
Yeah.
So I might not even be making sense. I might not necessarily be expressing something concrete at all, but I'm keeping something open so that when the time is right, another, I don't know if you've seen Game of Thrones, but there's
Yeah.
that whole thing of sending a raven, because obviously they didn't have telephones or post service, so they send a raven, and it's almost like at one time or another a raven is going to be sent from deep inside or from deep outside, and you'll be listening and you'll get that message.
Yeah, it is. It's keep messaging yourself.
Yes.
At one point, you will hear what you will get the message.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, definitely. So, one of the things that you do is you have an Etsy shop with Mythic Doodles. So that's what you do. So, can you explain to us what Mythic Doodling is, and then we'll go into journals.
It's so interesting because. We're talking about the validation of official education systems and everything like that. The title Mythic Doodling came about when I was talking to my best friend one day, and I was saying how I'm devoting so much of my time to this creative exploration that's really important to me. And if I was doing that same thing at a university and it was called something and it was funded and I got a document at the end of it, it would be a PhD, because I'm putting in like all the hours. I'm passionate about it like I would be about a PhD.
Yeah, you have a PhD packaged effort.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to call what I'm doing a PhD and give it a title. And this isn't to belittle the huge amount of work that PhD students are putting in around the world. It's to unlittle my efforts,
exactly,
and to validate them. And the title I came up with was Mythic Doodling, because I feel that my creative exploration has kind of like a light side and a dark side, and a sort of a kind of funny side, but also like a depth. And I didn't want to leave any of that out. So the word mythic is acknowledging the kind of archetypal images, the depth, the kind of sense of being on a journey that has deep significance, expressing things that are raw and emotional. And then the doodling side, which is also very much part of me, is like the cartoons and the celebrating the little moments, and they're kind of a bit funny and a bit cute. And yet they're also not frivolous, because they can also connect to something deep, just in a different way. So I felt like I wanted both those elements to be in the title of my self-declared PhD.
That's fantastic.
And then
I'm absolutely sure now that there should be Mythic Doodling.
I think maybe I need to be a professor. And
absolutely. No, it is, because I mean, how many people really do, in a way, Mythic Doodling throughout their life without really knowing that they're, taking part in a scientific kind of endeavor? This it is very much part of who you are, but also it's a thread, isn't it? It's a thread that kind of kept you on your path at times when you're not sure where you were exactly, what station you were at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was probably like in a cafe on the roadside because I'd missed my taxi or whatever. And I was like, where was I going again? So I mean, it's amazing how when you give something a name, what that does, after a time of feeling lost and what am I actually doing, just having a name felt quite empowering.
I find that too. I even start stories with giving the names of stories first, and then I know what I'm writing. It's very strange. It's very strange sometimes. It does go the other way around as well. Lola and the Poets also came through like a happenstance. It was very, very unusual the way it came about, because I was doing the Lola on Film blog, and Poets, Mavericks and Prophets was my old blog where I was writing all this psychological, philosophical, alchemical stuff. And then I thought, and then Lola and the Poets came as, okay, so I'm going to talk to poets, and I'm Lola. The moment I got the name of the podcast, I knew exactly what it's going to be about. And that's very interesting, the way that you name them. But I think that's also how, when we get our names, what our names mean, and how naming something, as the Latins would say, nomen est nomen, name is a sign.
Brilliant.
So you also do a lot of journals, and you have pretty amazing YouTube channel, which I only recently figured out that you do have. And that is, well, I've been following what you do for a long time through Facebook and Instagram, and I wasn't really aware of the YouTube, which is my bad, because if I just went a little bit, but you did also an animated series, which I found really beautiful. And so can you just tell us a little bit about where the journaling came from? Obviously very much connected to the Mythic Doodling, but also I think connected to the workshops that you do. Maybe a little bit more about that.
Yes. Yeah. So discovering art journaling was a really huge moment in my creative journey, because up until then I was sort of bumbling along on my own. I was writing poetry and stories, and I was doing cartoons, and I made my zine and declared that I was a mythic doodler and everything. And then I discovered art journaling, I think at the beginning of 2017. I signed up for a class that totally blew my mind. It was called Totems, and it was through an art community called Get Messy, and it was taught by Vanessa Oliver Lloyd, who is Dans Mon Crâne on Instagram. And this course was all about archetypes and animals and ancestors, like all things that totally lit me up. And up until then, I thought art journaling was just maybe scrapbooking or something like that I hadn't been so drawn to. And when I did this course, I was like, I have to get into this. This is just amazing, because it was all about this artistic expression of our inner worlds, and was totally celebrating it and giving lots of different methods of how to explore it. So I joined the community, Get Messy, after that. And it just totally blew my mind, because there were all these other people who just loved making art just for the sake of it, not to be utilitarian or to have to necessarily make a career out of it, although many of them are successful artists in their own right. And it was just so liberating. I had that feeling that you were talking about earlier of like, I found my tribe. And so I basically since then have pretty much been doing art journaling as my main artistic exploration. And I've just learned so much and found ways to keep going deeper into exploring the subjects that are really important to me. And it's basically art, what is art journaling? The $1 million question.
Yeah, I mean, what is art journaling for you, Divyam?
Exactly. After going on about it for ages, I've actually haven't said what it is. So basically, art journaling for me is something that happens in a book. That's a really important part of it, where each page can be either a totally new exploration or can continue on from the last, like exploring a theme. And you can use any art materials you want. You can collage, you can paint, you can scribble, you can draw, you can do all of those things together. And there's like a zillion different techniques that you can use. And it's something that sometimes can be very personal, like a diary. Sometimes I don't even want to show the pages that I've done because they feel a little bit raw. They can also just be fun, just mushing some different color paints around and just enjoying the experience. And yeah, it's like a personal artistic expression that's in a book. That's a short version.
And then also what I found very interesting with the YouTube channel and the little animations, or not so little, there's longer ones as well that you did, and also with the storytelling element of it, is that it's so curious how you just surf through all these different sorts of mediums, and how it starts with a book and ends with a little short film.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah.
And who's to say what it is? Because it is at the same time two things separately, completely, a book and a film, absolutely connected. One, but the thing is, of course, the film would not be there if it were not for the book. So of course it's a starting point.
Yeah.
But it just shows how all these things that we're talking about are just part of one spectrum, rather than, fragmented now is my go-to bad word. Do not fragment me. Yeah. Put me into collage, baby. Glue me up. So yeah, which is part of the things that you do in journaling is just that. It is how things are necessarily connected, because everything is connected. We're not separate from anything really in our lives, really. No. So do you still do the workshops that you did when I went to one of those, or do you plan to?
I am planning to do some more. I think the ones you came to, it was one autumn where I think once a month I had like an art gathering.
Yes.
And they were just sort of like 3 or 4. And then I didn't do any more after that. But I would like to get into sharing more art experiences with people. So it's something that I want to continue. And it's also something that feels really important, meeting people in person.
Yeah.
Because it's not so much about what gets conveyed through, we're now going to do this, we're now going to do that. Again, it's coming back to that atmosphere, there's an atmosphere when people are together around a table that is magic. Stuff happens that isn't necessarily to do with, I mean, it might be a bit to do with the things that I'm sharing of how to go about doing things, but it's more than that. It's just the energy of being together, which I really, really like. I would like to do some more of those.
I really loved being part of that. I think the energy of being together, and also your knowledge about things as well, because you're great at conveying things. I mean, I've got that from very early on from the color therapy, because it was one-on-one really. But this was a group setting that you're an excellent teacher. So you really do convey things, but you let other people breathe in and breathe out their own space, and connection with the people in the group as well, and connection with the art materials, which was also really important. And then also all the food that we had as well.
Yes. There was a lot of food. It somehow seemed very important.
Yeah, it was part of the whole experience. And it was so healing and beautiful and lovely. And it kind of kept me afloat for days in this really nice.
So
yeah, it was really beneficial in so many ways. And you also got some materials out of it as well, your own thing. So it was very beautiful. And I really, next time that you do it, and if I'm in London, I'll definitely go, because I just had
that makes me want to do it. Tell me when you're in
Yeah.
London and I'll do it.
Yeah. So it was awesome. And
thank you so much.
It was a really beautiful experience. And also when you were doing the storytelling at the poetry show that was connected to that film exhibition and Patterson and the Jarmusch film and everything, it was also a beautiful experience, because listening to you is a beautiful experience. So the storytelling bit really is probably key to the experience of others, or at least of me, of the way I experience you, which is just, of course, an aspect of you. What I wanted to ask you, because we were talking about element of you said that one of the things that you were doing is that you're making a tarot card set. Is this something that you're going to continue to do out of these drawings and experiences that you had with the journaling? Because I was really into it, because I saw the Empress, and I saw a couple of things like, yes. So that's another element that we're going to talk about, because it has to do with accepting magical parts of experiences and traditions.
Yes. Well, first of all, before I answer your question, I just want to say thank you very much for all the lovely things you just said. That really means a lot to me.
They're absolutely true.
Thank you. I'm very, very glad that you, just very glad that you were there and that you enjoyed it. And now I've forgotten what the question was.
But it was because we're talking about aspect of when you were doing various kinds of journaling and drawing, you were also you were part of, I think it's called the Witch Academy.
Oh yes.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and also about the drawings, the tarot major arcana drawings that I saw that you did, that you put on various social media, that I was so drawn to, because they were really lovely. And then I asked you, are you going to do a set? At least and you said you might. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Okay. So quite a few things were sort of in the mix when I was posting those pictures. One was another amazing art community that I'm part of called Art Witch Academy, which, just like when I joined Get Messy, I had this feeling of like, oh my goodness, light bulbs going off, I found my tribe. I had this feeling with Art Witch Academy also at a whole other level, because it was bringing together this sense of magicalness that we were talking about with my art. And like, for me, the more my art can connect with the things that I love and that are meaningful for me, the better. And basically, Art Witch Academy has all these different seminars to do with rituals and potions and art and tarot and archetypes. I mean, it's just like a dream come true. And it's founded by Vanessa Oliver Lloyd, who taught that very first art journaling class, Totems, that I absolutely loved, and Emily Mulroney and Caroline Hiscock, all three of whom are just amazing magical artists. And so I was really getting into the tarot classes in that particular semester of Art Witch Academy. And at the same time, I was doing a online tarot course with Little Red Tarot. So this was last autumn, I was completely submerged in exploring the tarot. So when I did the Empress card and a couple of the other pages, it was coming out of all this good stuff that I was receiving from Art Witch Academy and from Little Red Tarot. And it was just like explosions were going off, because I've always kind of been interested in the tarot, but didn't really know how to read the tarot cards. I did a completely different kind of reading called Gypsy card reading with normal playing cards. So suddenly it was like this whole feeling of connecting more deeply with my inner world, which was happening with my art anyway. Then it was happening with the tarot and really connecting with the images and the archetypes, and then bringing all that together and making art that was to do with tarot was just like I was in heaven.
Yeah, it was. I can only imagine, because it's really there's an element to it, the otherworldly element, which is, oh, wouldn't you like your whole life wish that there was an Art Witch Academy that you could go to? Yeah, it's one of those things. Oh, these things exist, just like the storytelling bit. Oh, okay. But so do you plan to go more into creating a deck of your own, or is it just a part of an exploration, and then or you don't have a clue what you're going to do with that at the moment? Because that's also an option.
That's an option, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, probably in the bigger picture, I don't have a clue, but also I feel like I would need to do quite a lot more exploration and be a lot more grounded in the tarot before I would consider doing a full deck. I'm sure I'm going to keep making experimental versions of cards and art pages that are about the cards, but I feel like when I pick up a tarot deck and I know that the person who made it really is coming from a place of deep knowledge of the cards, you can feel it, and it makes such a difference to the deck. So if I ever did a deck, I'd want it to come from a place like that, which I definitely don't have at this stage in my exploration, but I'm going to keep exploring for sure.
I encourage you to. My deck that I recently got is the Kim Kranz Wild Unknown Tarot and an Animal Spirit deck, and I thought of you when I was exploring it. It really resonates with me well, and it's just, I find it at the same time very personal. But I think she's very interesting, and in terms of what you do as well, because she started, I guess, as an artist really, and then kind of worked her way into the psychological part of it and also the spiritual part of it as well at the same time. So it is very personal, I guess, what she did, but it went into the collective unconscious seamlessly.
Yeah.
Because she touched upon things that were very much a part of the traditions that she comes from, but she made also the whole thing her own as well. So I find those kind of things very moving. When I saw your Empress, I thought it's so much Divyam, but also so much me, and so much everybody. It is at the same time, which is art. It really is. I don't know who ever said that, but whoever did is an absolute genius. So to the unknown genius out there,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that art has to be absolutely personal in order to become universal. You never start with the universal in art. You start with the personal. And if you're good at it, and it becomes universal. And I think that's really important, to kind of not have this burden of things of that they have to be, kind of something that will be a great addition to the bigger picture. Just do your own thing. It will inevitably become part of the bigger picture, I think.
Yeah.
So to kind of go back to spirituality and the way that we have our own spiritual biographies along with the kind of the CV that we put out into the world. Is there anything regarding your spiritual journey and the transformations that you went through that you feel that is particularly important reflecting where you are at now?
Well, I mean, in a way, if I just put myself right in the middle of my journey so far, one of the most interesting moments along the way was this kind of Zen moment that I had where I sort of dropped it all. I dropped the writing and the art and pretty much the storytelling, because I had this idea of just simplifying everything and just meditating and just, I didn't need all that extra stuff. I don't know what I was thinking. One of the things that I sort of really regret is that I threw away all the poems that I'd written to that time, the art I'd done up until then. It was like a real clearing. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of good because I got rid of a lot of stuff that was also weighing me down. And sometimes in those moments, you don't know what you're going to still need and miss and what is going to carry on weighing you down. But it actually ended up being a really valuable experience, because when I came out of that Zen moment and I was like, I feel like a piece of my soul is missing. I feel like dry bones. I had to work to reconnect with my creativity and to sort of re-find it. And that was a really valuable experience, because to kind of throw something away and then realize you've thrown away the most precious thing in your whole life, it does something. And so now, not necessarily that I was taking it for granted before that happened, but now I really don't. Like, I keep everything. And because I had that feeling of sort of being, something kind of being a little bit dead when I didn't have it, I now really value it in a way that I didn't quite before. It's like, this is part of my life. This is part of what keeps me alive. So that was an interesting moment along the way, where I think some spiritual ideas of being free and being minimal, I don't know, kind of led me down a certain path. And then I had to kind of retrace a few little, well, the birds had eaten all the breadcrumbs. I had to find some way back.
It's to understand when you do without something of just how valuable that is. Yeah. I think that this is a very important lesson. And that one can, I mean, you kind of brought it upon yourself, right? Because it's not that life taught you that. You took upon itself to teach yourself, and I just did that probably the best way to do it.
You know what occurs to me though, just as we're talking, that in a way I was sort of enacting my conditioning, that now I'm going to be a grown-up. I'm going to be a grown-up, evolved person, and creativity was somehow holding me back, or it was childish or whatever. You know, I was actually playing out what that inner voice would want me to do.
Right.
And it was after that, when I sort of reclaimed it, it was like almost like a ceremonial act of, no, this is super important. I'm not going to listen to that kind of rubbish. You know, sometimes you need to play something out to kind of actually feel the consequences of it. And I'm lucky that I could get it back.
I think that's really important now that we're talking about this process, is that it's when we are in state of rebellion, So whatever our conditioning is when we're growing up and we're in a state of rebellion, our choices are never really completely our own, because they're always somehow opposite of what we were required to do, or in some kind of compromise or negotiation, or then, so we're not really free to do whatever it is that we want to do. What you did in a way, and what life does to us if we don't do it to ourselves, is that there are situations where you fully then take on what is required of you. You go out of the state of rebellion and you go, okay, so now I will submit to this. And then you go, no. And then you're actually free.
Yeah.
Because then you're not in a state of rebellion anymore. Because rebellion is that youthful idea that you are always against something. And if you're always against something, then although it very often is an extremely good thing, the creation of things becomes very hard, because then of course you're working with forces that are constantly in opposition to something rather than in union, let's say. And I think that's, I don't know if you experienced it once you started, or at least, well, actually you said you did in a way, but that sense of freedom, of being free of constantly having to be in a state of rebellion against your own conditioning. Just go, okay, I did it. It didn't work for me. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah.
It's
like you've got a lived experience of, actually, I can't live like that, as opposed to being in a debate. It's like, I have an experience in my bones that this just doesn't feel good.
Yeah. I think this is such an important thing that you're talking about. I think it's so, somehow, now that we're going through the experience of talking about it, I see how it worked out as well in my life, and how it works out in lives of people that I know, that this idea of, unless you actually live through, because we go through the avoidance of things as well, it's not only the rebellion, it's the avoidance, it's that it's not fully being in this space of what we are reacting against. And it's a tough experiment. I mean, it's very, on the edge, isn't it, of going like, okay, so let's be part of this thing fully. But then once you are there, then that experience of being that is irreplaceable. Yeah, that's one hell of a transformative experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's when you probably fully embraced your journey now, that you're doing all the things that you're doing now in all this richness and variety of your storytelling and your expression.
Yeah, it was a new moment, because I realized that I need this. I need this stuff to live. So I kind of threw myself into it a lot more consciously, and actively seeking out, okay, what am I drawn to now? I've got this, I don't think I'm the only person to have ever used this image, but it's how I refer to it, is like I'm following a golden thread.
Yeah.
And it's leading me outwards towards new experiences, but it's also connecting me inside as well to new things in myself. And so I just started following that thread more consciously, and it led through all sorts of things. I mean, I did an MA in creative writing of science fiction and fantasy. I went to poetry courses. I studied cartooning. I revisited some storytelling courses, and I just sort of like blitzed myself with kind of all sorts of creative things.
Also, all the things that you do are very much connected. The form of them is actually a form that can be also academic and very street, and and anything in between. It is very much of the let's call it grown-up world, right? Because that's all the theme. It's what I feel for myself, not to project on you, is that I took upon myself to do all the very mature things that people do with their own work, however out of the box, as they say, that work is. So whatever unusual things that you do, whatever weirdness, let's say, that we have, it is actually, someone out there wants that.
Yeah.
And someone out there, is you can make a living out of it as well. It's not something that you just do out of your own need for a special kind of expression. It is very much a part of the conversation. And I think as well, this is our little pre-talk that we had before we, because we didn't see each other for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's like, for the listeners to know, we did not prepare for this talk. We just haven't seen each other for a long time. But it's also because there's so many people out there doing all sorts of stuff. And a lot of the people are very, very commercial and don't really know that much what they're talking about. Just got like, oh, this is now in vogue. Let's do a little bit of this and make some money out of it. And that's fine. But the things that they're offering are not really thought through, and not a lot of effort is put into it, and certainly not a lot of knowledge. And I think the more people that are actually have journeyed for decades in and thought themselves and educated themselves and worked on themselves and worked with others, allow themselves the weird of who they are to be out there fully, the better for society, because there's going to be more quality outlets out there, and people that are really good at it are doing it. And the more that people that do quality work are out there, the more those kind of experiences will be open to people that need them.
Yeah, and it's a kind of lifeline, just like my art was a lifeline, and still is, really. I mean, my art is part of what keeps me going. Hearing about these things like Art Witch Academy or like Get Messy, it's like, oh, this is a thing, something that I didn't even know how to name that really matters to me is actually a thing. I mean, it's such a great feeling.
Exactly. A great need to have someone address all these experiences and feelings and that we have that are of, let's call them, a magical nature, that were always part of who we are as human beings, but we're not really addressed by other than actually art, storytelling, but in a very conventional way. You watch films and you go, oh, wow, yeah, we're watching now fantasy films and we can let go, but not really in the way of actively interacting with something without it being prearranged. Let's say a video game where you go into it and then, so it's not virtual reality, it's actual reality. Actual reality of creating, whether it is in an imaginal space or not. And I think that's such a great movement forward.
I agree.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So we kind of going to do a little bit of a wrap up now of our conversation. I wanted to ask you one thing that we sort of missed, but the therapeutical side of what you do. You talked a lot about what it did in terms of your own self-healing, but what are your experiences in terms of working with others?
With art?
With art, with whatever is expression that you did throughout life, not necessarily what you do now, but just generally with working.
Well, I mean, at one point along my journey, I was actually a therapist, as you know. Yes. That's one of the places where we met.
Yeah, that's where I'm heading.
But in a way, when I look back at that time, to me, it's storytelling again, because if you'll remember, a lot of the way I was working was really engaging with the stories that each person carries inside. Yeah. And how they play out in life, and how we can creatively engage with those stories and take different paths and get messages from the different archetypes that arise, all these things. And I love that aspect of it so much. So I feel in a weird way that the art I'm doing now, because it's so personal in nature, and because it touches on symbols and images and archetypes that are very personal, but also, as you say, universal as well, that it's, in a way, it's a similar work. I mean, when I think of meeting up with people to work round the table with the art gatherings, my dream is to do an ongoing workshop where the story of our lives is the material for a particular book, and that we're engaging in the same way. You know, what are the themes? What's our journey been? What have been the challenges? What are the gifts? And looking at our own lives in kind of a mythical way. And I think that's deeply therapeutic, because we all face challenges in our lives and we all learn things, and there are gifts that we share with the world. There are gifts that we receive from other people and from the universe. And for me, storytelling was a way of working with this mythic level of life, and art is also part of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that looking at our own lives in this way is so therapeutic, because it gives us a bigger picture and also gives meaning and value to our struggles and the things that matter to us and our explorations. So I think ultimately that's what I find most therapeutic about my own art practice, that maybe something's bothering me and I sit down to make an art page about it. And then what is reflected back to me just through making the art is that experience on a much deeper level. And also the practice of making that art transforms the experience as I'm doing it. So by the time I'm finished the page. So that's what I would like to share with others in doing this work. And I think a little bit happened on those art evenings that we were talking about. And I'd like to go deeper into that, because that's, I don't know, that's kind of priceless. I mean, for me, making a good drawing or having good skills and techniques is not of the highest value. For me, the highest value is being able to express something of our inner worlds and to learn something about ourselves and shed light on it all in the process. That's like the gold.
Oh, absolutely. And also the way it transforms the ability to create within that setting is that feeling that you mentioned, of feeling something in your bones that you're able to do or don't want to do, but you feel that experience, and then it almost, what it does, you transform that experience in other areas in your life. So now suddenly you're able to create something that you thought was impossible outside of that experience within, let's say, a workshop or a therapeutic setting. And I think that's extraordinary how it works, but it does. And it can be done in such a beautiful way, because it's a beautiful setting. It's a very comfortable, very safe, very soft setting for some very potentially hard work to be done within that setting. And I think that's a beautiful way to put things together and help people address issues that are kind of hard to address if the setting were a bit more tough. And I think that's something. What I wanted to ask you also, before I ask you where people can get to see your stuff, and when we finish, is what are the most recurring themes you say that you do in your work? What are those stories or the things that you go back to most?
So the recurring themes and images that I keep coming back to are very much connected to quite a bit of women's workshops in nature that I've been doing over the last 3 years at a place called Earth Heart in the Forest of Dean. And we've done all sorts of processes and sharing and time out in the forest and ceremonies. It's been really, really amazing work. And while I've been there, often I've kind of like downloaded images kind of whole images that I then have to just go home and paint. And it's these images that have been recurring in my art. So the phases, the kind of archetypal phases of a woman's journey, from maiden through creatrix, high priestess, and the crone, they keep repeatedly showing up in my work. An ancient circle of women who are kind of ancestors, but kind of just wise, the archetypal wise women, they keep appearing. Images to do with the connection with the earth also keep appearing, because that's something that's been, I'm a bit of a star child. I'm like space and the universe and stars, and actually grounding doesn't come so easy for me, which is why I was attracted to do the work at Earth Art. So there's images of like standing on the earth, lying on the earth, connecting with the earth, all the layers going down within the earth. So yeah, those keep coming back again and again. And they're really nourishing. Speaking of the therapeutic value of art, every time it's like they're nourishing me, and also hopefully nourishing other people who see them. Those images have often been the ones that people have most connected with, I think, because they weren't my personal images in a way. They just sort of like came to me while I was lying on the earth in the forest, or.
Yeah, they existed in a space within, and you translated them for humankind.
Yes, it feels like that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I see your stuff, it's definitely that it exists. It's almost in itself a parallel universe. The things that you do.
Wow. I like the sound of that.
So where can one find connection to your parallel universe in the virtual reality?
There are various portals. I post pretty much everything that I do on Instagram. I'm Divsy on Instagram, and also on my Facebook page, which is Divyam Chaya Bernstein -artist. I've got a blog, divyamchayabernstein.wordpress.com. I've got a YouTube channel, which at the moment doesn't have any fancy name because I think it's under a certain number of followers. So I have to increase my following to get a fancy name. But you can find links to that from my website and my Facebook page. And I think that's it. Four portals. Oh, and I do have an Etsy shop where the Mythic Doodling zine is. It's currently, it might change by the time this goes out, but it's currently under renovation because I'm hoping to put some new stuff in there, which is kind of exciting. So at the moment there's the zine in there, but there may be other things coming up. And that's Mythic Doodling is the name of the shop at Etsy. So I think that's everything.
We're going to put all of these things in the show notes as well, for the listeners that are more visual types than audio ones. But yeah, we'll have all of that there, and that's super exciting news for the Etsy shop that you're going to be adding more stuff.
Yeah,
so people can get to them. I would like to thank you so much for being my second guest, and I really hope you will be a recurring guest.
Ooh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, it will be such a pleasure, and I can't wait to go to a new workshop.
Oh, yeah.
And to see you first, of course.
Yes, definitely.
And to meet up, but also to join. And also would love to check out all those different tribes you mentioned.
Yeah, maybe let's put the links to those as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. And thank you so much. And speak to you soon.
Leela, thank you so much. This has been really, really wonderful. It's just been great chatting with you.
Exactly.
Really
Everything else is a bonus. I really love talking to you. And if this is useful, not to go into the utilitarian, but if it's useful for somebody, it would be great. But if it's just great listening, that's good enough in itself and absolutely. Perfect as it is.
Thanks.
So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye. Lots of love.
Bye. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye.